Hello and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Eric Carruth Writer, and this week we're going to be taking a look back at the 2002 sci-fi psychological drama titled Solaris. Now, Solaris runs for 1 hour and 39 minutes long. It is directed by Steven Soderbergh. The script was also written by Steven Soderbergh. It is based off of the 1961 novel, also titled Solaris, by Polish author Stanislaw Lem. It's also a reboot of the 1972 Andrei Tarkovsky movie, also called Solaris, with just a whole line of different names and, of course, obviously different performers. And also may even be played more towards an American standpoint as opposed to a Russian standpoint. Okay, it is also produced by James Cameron, Ray Sancini, and John Landau. It is composed by Cliff Martinez, the cinematography by Peter Andrews, and it was edited by Mary Ann Bernard. And the stars of the movie, this is a very small cast, and it consists of George Clooney, Natasha McElhone, Jeremy Davies, Viola Davis, Ulrich Thakur, and John Cho. So, in his many years as a director, Steven Soderbergh has always had the desire to go beyond how other directors get their pictures done. He's not a guy who likes to think inside the lines. He likes to expand his boundaries where there's no limitations. Sure, he takes risks that others wouldn't dare to. He also remains loyal to his independent origins and takes liberation towards making them both provocative, albeit eccentric. And this movie kind of solidifies that provocativeness with its fair share of eccentricity. It's one of those movies where you either got it or understand it, or you simply don't. And though his motives are not problematic and his experimentations deserve some sort of applause, like all good scientists, some experiments don't always go as planned. Unfortunately, Solaris is one of those films that is very daring in its intentions, which I will give umbrage to. However, it's quite lumbering and dreary in its delivery. It's definitely not going to be for everyone because the pacing is at a turtle's pace. For a movie that's an hour and 39 minutes long, it sometimes feels like a 2-hour epic. But there's really nothing that's epical in this movie. The movie has kind of more like a romantic story mixed in with some psychological drama, mixed in with a little bit of some sci-fi goings on. Might have a little bit of suspense, not, particularly strong on violence. In fact, the violence is very, 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 very mild, nothing gratuitous. But there is a lot of unknowns that are happening in this movie. And you could either, like I said, understand what the hell's going on, or you simply just don't know. It's all up to the viewers. But all I do know is that this movie is not a happy one. It's not whimsical, it's not joyful, it's not high energy. There is a lot of deep, dark rooted depression in this movie. And I think this movie probably is one of the reasons why people might get turned off by watching this, simply because nobody wants to go to a movie or sit and watch a movie while feeling depressed. So, the purpose of movie going is to sometimes forget about your bad days and to just let it slide, even if it is just for an hour and a half or 2 hours or longer. But Solaris kind of like lets you stay depressed because this movie is depressing on all accounts. And I will get more into that. Starring the always cordial George Clooney, who usually, as always, this charming, smiling, always in a pleasant mood type of individual. Well, guess what? This is the least smiling you will ever see of George Clooney. In fact, I don't think even for once in this movie does he even show us those pearly whites. I mean, he's practically sacrificed his perky charms in an exchange for an eternally drab character who's driven by depression, guilt, remorse, and maybe even somewhat seeking redemption in hopes to rectify all of his past problems into trying to hope of some sort of renewal or to make things right again. He is an eternally drab character, and the green backgrounds from Solaris have similar videos to another, more successful Soderbergh picture, and I'm talking Traffic. The whole cinematography behind is immaculate. I mean, sure, from the early scenes with him getting out of bed to his somewhat lack of motoring skills of cutting vegetables without him placing a deep-rooted cut while he's bleeding off, to him going to work doing some kind of therapy sessions, knowing that this guy himself could use a little bit of therapy too, till the time he's been assigned to go on some kind of space mission to try to, I guess, to somewhat enter some kind of spacecraft that will lead us to some mysterious, almost like a planet or a semi-planetary type of force known as Solaris that has been fucking around with the minds of the space crew, which most of them would go on to either die or to just simply commit suicide. So Clooney is basically on this kind of mission to kind of set things straight with the crew or whoever is on the crew. He's assigned by a friend of his in hopes to try to, I guess, take them back or to see what's happening on there. I mean, let's face it, the the background is like really, what the feeling you get when you're on a spacecraft. Isolation. Even though it's not a sci-fi in the sense where we're speaking in a lot of like high term jibber jabber without knowing what the fuck people are saying. But it does have this provocative look of what it's like to be in space. Some people saying being on a rocket ship is like the coolest fucking thing going. When really, it's not. But that's really not the purpose. The spaceship thing is not the background. The background is more based on a human story than anything. The camera work is definitely handled with care and precision to create the correct atmosphere. But what really makes this movie a turnoff is that the gloominess is way over the top and doesn't offer anything uplifting or spontaneous, and feels that remaining gloominess is a symbol of artistic intelligence. Okay, it's not a happy movie. Okay, it's dark, it's dreary, and there's really no positive light in this movie. But do you have to make it so obvious and so frequent that you practically have to spoon feed it through our fucking throats? Jeez, just this whole talk about this thing is about to make me feel depressed. So Clooney stars as Dr. Chris Calvin, a widowed therapist who willingly follows the same theory path of existence every day in the future, not that far behind as I speak. Sure, he may wear stylish clothes, but his television looks archaic, even for 2002 standards. While basking in his melancholic ways, he gets interrupted by a colleague by the name of Dr. Gabarian, played by Ulrich Thakur, who resides at a space station near this mysterious planet called Solaris, and summons him to come forward right away because something urgent is happening, though we'll only know what's happening once Chris arrives. And, I mean, apparently once he arrives, there's really only like two survivors on the ship because everyone else seems to have passed away. Hell, even the person who put him on this assignment, Gabarian, remains dead. And there's only about possibly only three people on there. One is a guy by the name of Dr. Snow, played by Jeremy Davies. And then every time Calvin tries to ask him, like, what the hell is going on, he gesticulates with some random bullshit answer like, I don't know, Doc. What do you know? So I'm asking you, yeah, well, your guess is as good as mine. You'll just have to see for yourself to know all the answers. Is there anybody else on the ship? Right, there is somebody on the ship. But if you're expecting any clearer answers than me, well, yeah, not likely. See, that's the way he talks. Right, the way I talk. Maybe just the way I fidget. But then again, don't you fidget as well? Yeah, that's the way he speaks. He practically kind of circle jerks around his brain, just to sort of like have some kind of incoherent answer while also trying to understand pieces together. It's just, he just doesn't sound like this. He's supposed to be this well known scientific expert, but yet he's not really good getting you, the proper answers. So then he tries to speak to this Dr. Gordon, who seems quite hostile of any visitors on the spaceship, and seems a bit reluctant at first to even gain any kind of information to Calvin. But even if she does, she still doesn't fully give the whole inside story. I mean, it's just pretty much Chris Calvin will have to figure these things out about what the hell is going on for himself. Dr. Snow's not giving him any clear answers, obviously. Dr. Gordon isn't. The only other person on this ship is some little boy running around, and nothing personal against kids, but even I don't think this boy will probably even give a clear answer. And sometimes I often wonder, is this boy an actual real person or some kind of a manifestation of some sort? Like some kind of like walking spirit that's not, translucent or anything like that. But, you know. So when Calvin arrives at the space station, you see like the body of Dr. Gabarian in some kind of like a conveyor belt of some sort. And there's also one that's got like blood stains that strangely start to materialize. And if that's not strange enough, crew members had all except for two died off from suicide, including Gabarian himself. The two survivors include a demented but an amusing man named Dr. Snow, played by Jeremy Davis, who's really not reliable with information. And the other is a Dr. Helen Gordon, played by Viola Davis, who is even less outgoing. So we can't really quite get anything about what they're trying to say. In reality, the taciturn ways are just a figure of speech by ways of storytelling. It's one of those you'll have to see to believe. Anything remotely outgoing for them will very likely get them out of their comfort zone. Now, we don't want that now, do we? The station has some kind of macabre possession, and this Solaris spacecraft is pretty much what could look like to be some sort of purgatory. We don't know. Does this planet have some kind of secret magic powers that could either test you so that you could go to the brink of insanity to the point of just surrendering your life? In Calvin's case, one time while he was dreaming, he kept seeing, like flashbacks of his deceased wife, who he still has not fully grieved since her passing. At first we know very little about her. We do know eventually, as time goes on, more about her as her character slowly but surely begins to develop. So he keeps having these visions, these dreams of his dead wife, Rhea, played by Natasha McElhone. And it seems that this mysterious planet that's being studied might actually be the planet itself studying the humans. So while we often like to explore planets to see what there's life there, or if we're alone, or what kinds of strange but amazing discoveries we can find, I think in this case it's the planet itself that's exploring into the minds of humans. So while he's dreaming of his dead wife, all of a sudden she just materializes. Of course, he's like freaked out of his fucking mind when he sees her at first. He then puts her onto some kind of space pod and drives her off because he's like, nope, I'm just dreaming this. You're not real. You are an illusion. But the question is she? We all pretty much know that there is a bit of her that's an illusion, but what part of her is an illusion and what part of her is a reality? It appears that Rhea, his deceased wife, is actually a replica a copy, a duplicate. But the question is this the same Rhea? Living and breathing entity? Or is she just some soulless figure of his imagination that jumped out of his memory box and is like right there in front of him at his bedside? Apparently, he ends up having another dream of her, and voila, what happens next? I guess we have Rhea 3? The first Rhea, of course, being the real Rhea, but she's dead. The second one got driven off somewhere in outer space to who knows. And now all of a sudden, she materializes again. So then he apparently tries to just give in. The idea of a planet studying humans seems very weird at first, so it's no surprise that Soderbergh wants to direct this kind of film. It also caught the eyes of Russian film director Andrei Tarkovsky in 1972, who made an equally sluggish movie adapted from the novel by Polish author Stanislaw Lem. And sure, the film rejects upon the subject matters of life, death, grief, redemption, and neediness. It just feels like it was filmed in a boiler room. And it could have been that. So then Clooney's like trying to wonder like what the fuck is going on. And he explains to the doctor that the doctors that everyone has a manifestation, a copy of some sort. Or somebody in their lives who they feel bad about losing and have not recovered. I guess in Snow's case, well, he doesn't really even seem to know because he basically just gesticulates and you're not going to find a clearance with him. Dr. Gordon, who's not really as much any help as Snow, well, she claims that it's her brother. And that she has some kind of device that keeps her. I mean, the reason why you don't see her manifestation or her muse is because she has came up with some kind of invention, some kind of Higgs something contraption that will zap them away. And that she's more than willing to use the apparatus on Rhea, but somehow Calvin does not want that to happen. But of course, every time he sees her, he always has these things on his mind that he only really remembers her for being a person who also has some severe mental health issues. And that when they were like alive on Earth, they got married. Everything at least seemed fine at first, then she ends up getting pregnant. And then she ends up having an abortion, which inevitably leads to them getting into a heated argument, and it eventually led to her suicide. I mean, and now all of a sudden that he's here at this space station, being overlooked by the planet Solaris. We see her with scenes where she eventually consumes a whole bunch of blue pills, which causes her to once again propose suicidal tendencies. And then she says something like, "You don't remember me for really anything very much, except that I'm some kind of suicidal freak. That's really all you remember me for." And even though he would like to deny it, but that's probably the only thing he does remember. And then she thinks that, the more he thinks about her from her days on Earth, the more he'll always just keep reminding himself and reminding herself that she is basically a self-destructive individual. I mean, it's very hard to swallow. And like I said, this movie might be slow and boring to a lot of people. And even I have to admit, the movie does run at a snail's pace, and there is some parts of me that was like, can we just keep the things going? Sure, there's a lot of Stanley Kubrick intention in terms of subject matter, and it keeps the distance from the audience. To say that this movie's genre is a sci-fi is quite an injustice. Is quite unjustified because it's not really a sci-fi. The sci-fi elements are really pushed aside. Sure, it takes place in a space station. Sure, they're making copied manifestations of deceased relatives or loved ones coming around. But instead, we kind of get a bit of a love story, which is bombarded with illusionary manifestations backed up by a myriad of flashbacks and plenty of space inclined dialogue. The worst aspect of the dialogue is that someone speaks and then they pause for a very long time. Like what? Like you're trying to understand and decipher what's written on the script? I mean, come on, why the long pause? It's as though they either forgot their lines or that Soderbergh deliberately made them pause between conversations. Either way, it just doesn't feel organic. It just makes the slow and heavy handed movie all the more laboring. It's like, come on, get this bullshit over with. We want to fucking move on. Soderbergh's script never really moves the settings very much, and we don't explore the surroundings of the planet. And to me, it looks more like some computer elongated algorithm rather than a planet. Calvin's deceased wife comes back from the dead. Or is she? She looks real, she talks real, she feels real. When she touches him, it's real. But is she the real Rhea, like resurrected? Or is she just a copy? There's nothing raptus about it, or anything joyous either. It's just a barrage of questions regarding Rhea's existence. And even she sometimes even questions her existence. Like, what the fuck am I? Even she probably will also like some answers as well. She might be a clone duplicate of Rhea, but in reality, it's not Rhea, which adds nothing but confusion ad nauseam. To make matters worse is that there's a scene where Calvin opens up the conveyor belt that contains the bloodstains, and we reveal that the body is that of the real Dr. Snow, and that the copy version of Dr. Snow has kind of took over. So that kind of really understands why this guy talks in such gesticulating jargon and speaks so incoherently, because even he himself doesn't know what the fuck is going on. I mean, he's just trying to piece together a few puzzles here and there, and that's the reason why he sounds so incoherent and seems to speak in these random riddles. But the intense situation is never relieving or happy, but more lenient towards philosophical and theoretical intentions. So there's no real happy reunion. Calvin is not really all fully that happy to see Rhea because now he knows that she's a copy. And as long as he's still alive, he could only remember her for being a suicidal freak. And who knows, if he tries to keep reuniting with her, she's just going to keep committing suicide only to what? Just to reappear in his dream again 500 times? So apparently the movie at the end kind of has, I believe, Dr. Gordon. I don't remember if Dr. Snow or Dr. Snow 2 hop onto the Althena to drive back to Earth. At first, Calvin decides to go ahead and do it, but instead he decides to just stay back and feels that he decides to just surrender and stay on Solaris, where he can actually end up becoming a copy duplicate and would spend the rest of his life with Rhea, even asking himself, am I real? Are you really back in my life? And then she ends up saying something like, we don't have to think about these things anymore. So I guess some ways this movie may have some sort of a bittersweet ending, I suppose. Yeah, I guess you could kind of say something along that terms. That's what I'm like to think. So when he gazes into her existence, he questions his own level of sanity and sees if he can piece something together. For all this to make any logic behind it, the end result is actually quite revolting and mundane. This is a pretty dull picture if you really want to know. Not much action going on, a lot of dialogue and a lot of confusion and a lot of what the hell is this all about. It all results in a very trance inducing predicament that will likely get viewers to become very impatient rather fast. It doesn't help that the score by Cliff Martinez is pretty much one note and uninspiring. There will be times when a person will gaze at the window and notice a red thing swirling, which was to be Solaris, this mystery planet that does weird shit. The window scenes are the only outdoor moments we will find in Solaris, which makes the whole movie so isolated and grounded. And I think if you're on a spacecraft and there's nobody there, chances are you're gonna go crazy. People are organically social individuals. We are. I mean, if you imagine going for a week without looking at an entire human face, you're gonna go crazy. I mean, I'm sorry. Sometimes I like to be alone, yeah. But I don't like to be alone all the time. I do like to go out and mingle once in a while. I may not see a lot of my friends every single day, but at least I like to know how they're doing. But and you know, I think that if you are alone on a ship, it can be quite lonely. The strange thing is that in spite of Solaris being a big budgeted movie, there's really nothing that shows it. So this movie really, really drowned me. Not in amazement, but in sheer unadulterated boredom. it just really, really wants to get its message across, but it does so in such mundane fashion. I can't really recommend this movie too much because of that. And so for that, I give Solaris from 2002 a 5 out of 10. It had potential to be interesting. There were some good elements, and I have nothing against the acting. I mean, we get to see George Clooney play something far that isn't Clooney. We're not seeing happy Clooney, we're seeing dark and gloomy Clooney. Which is refreshing, but there's nothing really that sticks out too much. It's quite forgettable in its delivery. So it's a 5 out of 10 for me. So I guess this ends my ride review. Thank you all for listening in. If you wish to subscribe to my YouTube channel, please feel free to do so. If you wish to leave a comment, go right ahead. Just remember the 3 simple rules: be kind, be courteous, and please refrain from any rude comments. And I'll be back again with another movie review. So until next time, this is Eric Correct Writer saying, keep watching those movies, and I'll see you around. Goodbye.